Bron the dinosaur is the most cursed character in the history of mascot horror. Seriously, not the Mimic, not Bendy, not Doughy, Bron. This dinosaur is one of the most recognizable faces in all of mascot games, but very few people know who he is outside of this one picture. And once you hear the actual stories around him, you'll have to agree with me that this toy has lived the most miserable existence ever put to horror game lore. And that's what brings us here, as the entire reason I'm doing this video is because of one image that has been etched in my brain, and no matter how hard I try, I can't ever forget it. It's this.
We have eyes open.
And if you're like me and you want to get to the bottom of what you just saw, I need to start from the very beginning. So Reapz peeps, I hope you're well, because pretty soon you may be questioning just why you should subscribe to the horror of this channel. But I do hope you consider it. Bron the dinosaur was made by Elliot Ludwig in 1961, just 11 years after Poppy Playtime hit shelves. And his name is surprisingly a shortening of the dinosaur he's modeled after, a Tyrannosaurus. It's the Brontosaurus. The Brontosaurus. His entire persona was surprisingly based around nutrition. Like here we have a poster saying, "Eat healthy like Bron." And on his NFT, yes, NFT, that's a conversation for another time, it says he ate a strict diet of 4,000 calories a day to best maintain his athletic figure. Whew, what a guy. But it was the fact that he was advertised and promoted so much in the first chapter of Poppy Playtime that people started to get ready for him being the main bad guy of Chapter 2 after Huggy fell to his supposed death. But guess what? He wasn't the main bad guy. Mummy Longlegs was. He was, however, in the game as a standee.
What do you call a dino with one eye? Do you think he saw us?
Oh, and as this, a large weight in the reject room that you need to move off this platform so you can reach the next area of the game. Some may say an inconvenience. And fans were not happy that Bron was still just an image, an inanimate object. But luckily, there was one clue that he was going to definitely be the main villain of Chapter 3.
What do you call the scariest dinosaur? Me!
So once again, it was only a matter of time before we would finally see the Bigger Bodies experiment that so many people were invested in gracing our screens. It was with the release of the Chapter 3 trailer that we finally got to see the largest Bigger Bodies experiment come to life as oh, it's a cat. It's catnap. My bad, I forgot. You see, Mob Entertainment now had a running joke where they would hint at Bron being a villain in the game, like this trailer for Chapter 1, before scrapping him. But here are two things you probably don't know about Chapter 3. He was supposed to be in it. This toy store section was supposed to be open and have Bron as a roaming enemy, much like Mr. Light acted in the school area. However, it was scrapped. So they were going to include him in another iconic section that I guarantee you remember if you played the game. Bron the dinosaur was supposed to be in the place of Dog Day. Yes, you heard me correctly. Bron was supposed to talk about catnap taking over before being eaten from the inside out by feral critters. And yes, he was supposed to chase us around once more, but he got replaced by Dog Day. So not only were his appearances cursed, but his backstory was about to be as well, because Mob Entertainment knew that for 3 games, they could not exclude a character they had heavily implied as pivotal to the franchise. So it was decided that Bron would be the subject of one of the most disturbing ARG videos ever released. On April 22nd, 2023, a video was dropped on Mob's YouTube page, simply titled Restricted Restoration.mp4, a video that showed the inner workings of the Playtime Co. labs and the creation of the experiments that roamed the factory. But there was a huge twist. You see, most toys were made from orphans who were under the care of Elliot Ludwig's orphanage, so they had no parents to manipulate, no paper trail, no evidence that would put the spotlight on them for being responsible for these living monstrosities. You see, Catnap was made with a child called Theo. Yarnaby was made with a child called Quinn. But Bron wasn't made with a child. Bron was different. Bron was unique. Bron was the first of his kind due to one disturbing reason.
Test subject is 59-year-old Thomas Clark, a full-time employee at Playtime Co. since 1955.
Bron was an adult. No longer was Playtime operating on children without their consent, but instead they were now using more mature minds to operate on in the Bigger Bodies initiative. But why? Were they finally realizing the error of their ways? Were they finally growing a conscience? Or was it for an entirely different purpose altogether? Well,
6 months ago, he was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. Now, Mr. Clark, of sound mind, has volunteered for this experiment.
Self-preservation. You see, the reason that children were used for the experiments was due to the fact that their minds and bodies were still malleable. They could take on these harsh changes of both mental and physical well-being, while those who were older were less flexible in adapting to something they didn't know. So the only reason that Thomas volunteered himself was to stay alive as he was slowly dying from cancer eating away at him. And he did the only thing that would give him a shot at still being able to live an existence. Only problem was that it was uncharted territory. He was 59. He was the first adult to volunteer for this life-altering surgery, and it became apparent why experiment 1199 was the last of its kind.
We have eye movement. Can you hear us, Thomas?
This haunting image, the one that made me deep dive into this character, it wasn't just trauma. It wasn't just adjusting. It was much more than that.
1199 displayed much more disorientation than we expected. Subsequent mental testing metrics were also cut practically in half. It's just conjecture on my part, but I don't believe he knows where he is or what's happened to him.
And if you think that was the end of the suffering, we're only just getting started. Because what Thomas also didn't realize is that due to being built under different circumstances, his pain was only just beginning. Because on top of not knowing where he was or even what he was, the other experiments did. And for this hypothesis to fully work, he had to be initiated into the holding cells of all the other experiments. All the experiments that didn't have a choice to be made into these toys. All of them with the minds of angry, scared, and vengeful children. And they knew something was different about Bron. Bron, or should I say Thomas, was attacked by a swarm of toys. Toys that probably saw his eyes and remembered him as one of the workers who took them into surgery against their will. A moment of complete chaos and revenge wrapped into one violent outburst. But the craziest thing about it is he didn't die. He received a fate much worse, because even though Boxy Boo attacked first and started the melee, they didn't finish the job.
They would have killed him had the research team not intervened, and even then there was still significant damage to the internal structures with some of the anatomy, namely the larynx and the thyroid, having been completely devoured. It took 12 hours in surgery to stabilize 1199.
Not only did Bron no longer have a voice of his own, but he was isolated from any interaction whatsoever. No toys, no staff, just him alone. Because his answer for survival and, dare I say, immortality now sees him in a purgatory where he exists but does not live. A theme that seems to repeat itself when it comes to Bron. And if you think the suffering of Bron ends there, you'd be wrong. Very, very wrong. Because although Bron got this horrifying story on Mob Entertainment's YouTube channel, not everyone goes deep diving lore outside of the game. So the devs were in a bit of a predicament. Bron still wasn't represented as an experiment inside any of the franchise's main chapters. And with the upcoming Chapter 4, there were plans to make him a free-roaming enemy, hunting down the player in various areas of the map. But guess what? No, they didn't scrap it this time. They just gave that role to another experiment instead. Yarnaby. Bron had been cut again. So a plan to insert another dinosaur-themed toy was conceived, Pianosaurus, a soon-to-be fan favorite that got its own marketing material to show that this dinosaur would definitely be in the next chapter. Maybe to make us forget about Bron for a bit, Who knows? And you'll be pleased to know he was in the game for 30 seconds. That's right, Pianosaurus can be seen for the length of a standard TV advert before being utterly decimated by Doughy the Dough Man. So once again, Mob Entertainment flipped off all the fans of dinosaurs and gave an ugly end to anyone even associated with Bron. To add insult to injury, Mob Entertainment even released a webcomic that shows Pianosaurus's POV where he sees the player as Bron himself. You heard me correctly. They made the player Bron. Now, you may think this is the end of the Bron saga, but oh no. Because Mob Entertainment was about to do something that had been hinted at for 5 years. Bron actually made his way into the 5th chapter of the game. I'm super serious. He made it into the game as an actual character. A chapter aptly named Broken Things. Because the only thing that will break is your mind once you see what they did with him. In the boiler section of the Playtime collabs, we are finally graced with Bron's behemoth body and proof that he's the largest of all the bigger bodies experiments we've ever encountered. And unlike Pianosaurus, he does not die. He is well and truly alive for the entirety of the chapter, unfortunately. The reason I say unfortunately is because the Mob devs show they have a very love-hate relationship with Bron. They finally deliver what we've been waiting for, but turn it into nightmare fuel. How sweet. Because once you register just how big the experiment is, you then begin to notice things that are quite off. Bron has chains around his feet and neck. His legs have been broken so he can't move. His stomach is also cut open and the insides are on the outsides. But yet, his mouth is still chewing. Why? Well, my friends, the truth is hard to swallow. Pun intended. Bron is the living embodiment of a garbage disposal. He has been constrained to a room that he is too big to get out of so he can eat all the dead experiments that are decaying and rancid. This is due to the fact that because of his size, he can digest them. Digest them into a substance that the smaller critters known as the wrong side animals can now eat and keep themselves alive with. Bron is now forever in a holding cell where he is continuously hungry, as whatever he eats is then taken from him by gangs of smaller broken toys that serve the prototype. And you cannot help him. You can't take the shackles off, you can't talk to him, you can't even end his horrifying existence. He is just alive to live in misery until the end of his days. This is why Bron the dinosaur is the most cursed character in mascot horror history. Because he doesn't just have one story, he has many, each of them ending in suffering and hopelessness that you cannot reverse. And with chapter 6 coming up, you have to wonder, will it get even worse? But hey, it's not all that bad. The doctor says Bron was his favorite toy as a kid. Thanks to all my members who sponsored this video. Please consider liking, subbing, and sharing. Till next time, peace.